Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I am your host. And in today's episode, I'm talking with Keith Edwards from Keith Edwards Landscape Consultant. Now, Keith's been in the industry 40 years and not surprisingly, he's got an insane amount of knowledge. So I came across him on his podcast, the Muddy Boots podcast. And I was just blown away with not only his passion, but also the amount of knowledge that he's got. So I was really keen to talk to him about it and hear his story about how he started. And it was great hearing how he did start. So he started studying landscape design and then he wanted to get a better understanding of how things went together rather than just how to draw them. So he worked in grounds maintenance to start with and then moved on to a place called Turf Research before then moving on to a landscaping company where he was doing design there, but also in charge of irrigation and running construction crews. So he's had the full range of the industry doing design, construction, maintenance. And he also spent a fair bit of time working for the Diggers Club. So, and also working around Australia as a part of that, which is where a lot of his knowledge comes from. So, yeah, fascinating person to talk to and extremely passionate. And it was great to talk to him about some of the soil additives that he does and recommends in his designs to go along with planting. So that's well worth a listen to hear about that. And I definitely recommend checking out his podcast that he does with Elizabeth, known as the Garden Girl. They're both pretty knowledgeable and love what they do. I think they're on a bit of a couple of weeks break at the moment, but there's plenty of episodes to go back and listen to, and they're not too long either. And so if you enjoyed this episode, you'll absolutely love the Muddy Boots podcast. So hopefully you enjoy this chat with Keith Edwards. Keith, thank you very much for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. My first question for you is, how did you start in the industry?
Well, in the usual manner, I studied design and then I went into horticulture, and that was it. And that was such a long, long time ago that I can't even remember the actual dates. But what you learn about garden design and plants, it's from the people that you meet along the journey rather than than the studies that you've done. This is just and I've been very, very fortunate to have had a wonderful lot of people that have influenced me and that have shown me the ways of doing good design, I guess.
So do you know where your idea of wanting to get into design started from?
Not really. I mean, I'd always liked dabbling in people's gardens in terms of plotting them out and working with them. So I guess that started very, very early, probably around about 13 or 14. And you start off just by making a few bucks mowing someone's lawns. That's how it all started for me, and then it just grew on from that. And I had an uncle who was just absolutely brilliant in terms of his green thumb, I guess, and that just brought me even further into it. I just loved being with him. It was just great.
So you studied design. How long were you doing design for before you moved into horticulture?
Probably 4 years then, and then I sort of didn't want to just jump in and do design work because there was an empty space in there for me, and that empty space was having learned how to draw, but not necessarily how to put the whole thing together. So my first foray into horticulture actually began with starting off as a groundsman at Toorak Ladies College here in Mount Eliza many, many years ago, and that's where it all began. And in about 3 years, I worked my way up through the ranks, and I was actually curator of Toorak College, and we were doing a lot of construction of new buildings, so there was a lot of landscaping involved with all that and plant selections. And then, of course, that we put in a 10,000 square metre oval, which was on a rather steep slope, where we had to work out the cut and the fill and the batters and everything else, and then put the drainage in, the irrigation system in. So it was a real good grounding for what I was doing there. And I was involved with a business that's no longer around anymore. It was Turf Research, which was Department of Agriculture at that stage. And we were working on the actual oval, which was the sand profile oval. So it had 40 centimetres of pure sand, which meant that it would never, ever flood during heavy downpours. So it was an all weather all year round sort of oval, I guess. So that was terrific working in that.
And then, so how long you were there for? 4 years, did you say as well, or 3 years?
No, I was at Toorak College for about 7.5 years, and then working with Turf Research. One of the guys one of the professors at Turf Research, he and I got on so very, very well that he said, listen, we would love to have you out at Turf Research doing some consultancy work. So I went out with them, and that gave me an absolutely fantastic grounding for turf species. We had literally probably about 60 or 70 different types of turf species, and we trialled them. We had plots on them and all the rest of it. And that foray gave me opportunities to do testing of different chemicals to try to control spring dead spot, which was a real problem for bowling greens north of the Divide. So I designed spray equipment that would just do 1 square metre, and then we'd swap a bottle over and then clean it out with fresh water and go onto the next strip and just work our way through a whole bowling green with all these different chemicals to see how it would affect spring dead spot. And that's where we discovered that the most resistant form of grass for that was actually Santarana couch, of which these other various forms have come off since that. So I got a great grounding in that as well at Turf Research, which was fabulous.
Yeah, awesome. Have you got a favourite turf now, or does it depend on the situation?
It depends on the situation, but the one that I'd specify the most would probably be something like Tiff Tuff or Sir Walter Buffalo, depending on what sort of use it's going to get.
Yeah, I've got Tiff Tuff at my place, and I quite enjoy it a lot. But
it's also one that doesn't have reactions to people that have got that suffer allergies, for instance. I had a client over in Clifton Springs Way that one part of her request for the brief was that she had to have a grass that was not going to cause her any problems. So we were lucky to find a huge area out that way there. She could go over and lie on the grass, chase the kids on the grass and do all that. So it was great, that was another great grounding. You're just learning something every day. It's just fantastic in this industry. It's brilliant, just brilliant.
Yeah, like the reason I wanted to get you on because you're so passionate, and that's the first word that's on your Instagram bio as well. That's very, very relevant. Where'd you go to after the turf research?
Right. Well, I was there for probably about 3 years, and then I bumped into an English chap who had his own landscape business, and he was the largest landscaping company on the Mornington Peninsula, which was where I lived at that stage. And I took on the role of running a landscape crew on that, and that gave me the other interesting things that it's very easy to draw how to put paving down and very easy to draw how to put a plant in the ground, but unless you're actually doing it physically, you just miss those things. So I stayed with him for about 7.5 years and we had a crew of about 45 at one stage, and then we were putting in irrigation systems, and that was another great learning cave because I took that upon myself to learn all about irrigation systems and types of irrigation systems. And that became another journey. So I was running the irrigation side of his business as well as the design side. So it all sort of came in together. So we actually installed on the Mornington Peninsula the first hydraulic solenoid control systems that had ever been installed. And that was just absolutely sensational. And we were using all Toro products, which were the first of the gear drive sprinklers that were designed by Ed Hunter, who went out on his own. But the quality of the plastics and so forth that Toro had was just absolutely beyond any other company. I mean, at that stage, Rainbird had big bucket sprinklers that used to fill up with dirt and leaves and rubbish, whereas the gear drive sprinklers just worked so well. And then for the irrigation in garden beds, we went straight to a sprinkler designed by an Israeli company called the Dan sprinklers, which on a stake they've got a 6 mil tube that you can cut and extend, so you don't need to worry how far away from the main line you are. It has an anti-misting device, which means that it doesn't matter how close it is to the source of the pressure. It's only going to put out the required amount of litres per hour. And then it had full circles, half circles, rectangular sprays, quarter circles, down sprays, the works. It was just an absolutely ripper sprinkler system. Absolutely brilliant.
And when did drip line come in?
Well, drip line was actually already in. Netafim had that in at that particular stage. But I guess the problems that we had with Netafim and the drip line systems is once the jobs were finished, we were always being called out to do repairs because the gardeners were putting spades through the drip line, so it was becoming an absolute mess. And then, of course, they get clogged up. So the drip line was at the same time, but it wasn't anywhere near as effective, I don't think, as the micro irrigation systems of the dams.
And do you specify the irrigation in your plans that you do now?
If my clients request me, yes, I will, and I'll design the system around them. But it's working with contractors, for instance, that I know that I can say to my client after I've designed their garden, if you go with one of these guys, I guarantee you won't need to call me in to project manage the job. And one of the guys that does the majority of my work was actually my first apprentice after I left Woodlands and started up my own businesses. Matt joined us in 1989, so he goes back a fair way too, but he's just an absolutely brilliant tradesman, and he won't do the sorts of jobs that he doesn't believe he can not do to the best of his ability. Certain types of paving, for instance, he'll pull in contractors that he's worked with, and Matt was lucky enough to go around the world and build golf courses, so he knows a lot about irrigation as well. So I've got full confidence in using guys like him.
Yeah, I heard that you mentioned him a couple of times on your podcast, and I love that you've actually got, like, he's had a business, put you in your first apprentice, you trained him up, and then he went out on his own, and now you're getting him to build most of your projects.
Yeah, even when he finished his apprenticeship with us, and he was very reluctant to go out on his own, but we gave him a little push because we knew how good a tradesman operated, and then we used him on our jobs as well, which was just fantastic. So at that stage, we had two businesses. We had Rain Dance, which was the irrigation arm of the business, and we had another landscape design and construct company called Cobble Creek. So and we did nearly all the Ampol Road pantry service sites throughout Australia. So we would be sending the likes of Matt and a couple of the other apprentices all around Australia doing the constructs.
Yeah, right.
And then after we'd done all the we designed, constructed, and did all the build of the jobs. We then went and offered Ampol Road Pantry at that stage a maintenance contract to look after every one of their sites, because we just went back and said, well, listen, you've spent at that stage it was probably 40,000-50,000. We're going back back to the 1990s, so it was quite a lot of money. So it was a lot of investment on their part. And if they weren't about to look after it or have someone who knows what they were doing look after it, well, it was a bit of a bit silly. So they jumped on that as well. So we had guys trained up in New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia to do the maintenance as well, which was just fantastic. And that's where I was able to draw back on my time in the turf industry, my time in the design industry, and my time in the construction industry as well, to bring it all together.
So how did a job like that come about? Is that from building relationships and doing other projects, and then they got bigger, or?
What, with Ampol?
Yeah.
Ampol Road Pantry was the first of the convenience stores that were associated with petrol stations. And it came out of Ron Finnemore's company, who was a major transport company in Shepparton. So they set up Ampol Road Pantry to do the specialised sites where they put franchisees into the actual convenience stores and petrol stores. So we drove up. We did initially an irrigation design for one of the sites down here in Mount Eliza, and then we went up and we took up a whole heap of plants. We took up mulch. We took up bricks. We took up irrigation, and we did a presentation in his office, Peter Vibert's office at that stage. And he just got up and walked out. He brought the other directors in and said, "Have a look at this," and it blew him away. So we got on the phone and he said, "We're having one constructed out at Fountain Gate." So he spoke to the builder out there and he said, "How much are we allowed on this?" And he's on the PC for the landscape, and he gave him a figure and he said, "Okay, well, I just put a hold on that. These guys are going to be doing it." And we did such a great job that they had the TAFE used to come out and have a look at the way that site was put together. So that was a real buzz for us as well.
Yeah.
Really, really good.
They don't seem to be caring much about the gardens at Servos anymore.
No, they don't, and that's a real shame because it lets everything down, and it lets the designer down, it lets the environment down, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a good opportunity there because I assume they have to have a certain amount of green space, otherwise they wouldn't have it.
Yeah, they do. But I mean, a lot of the stations were maximising, the concrete and the parking and all the rest of it. And this is where it was such a good fit with Road Pantry because they wanted to have something that was a niche setup, a niche business, I guess. So that worked
Yeah.
really, really well. Really, really good.
And you mentioned something about Woodlands before where you work there. Like what was that role?
Well, Woodlands is where when I left Turf Research, I went out and worked with David Wood, and we did a lot of really high end, high class, landscape designs and
Yeah.
construction. So that was really, really interesting.
Yep. And so how long you had the business going for yourself now?
Well, I've only recently gone back to the. Look, I went after I'd finished up doing my own design and so forth. I wanted a bit of a break. I wanted to have a new role, I wanted a new challenge. So I was actually walking somewhere at some stage, and I walked into a guy by the name of Clive Blasey. I don't know whether you've heard of Clyde Blasey.
No.
No, Clyde Blasey started off the Diggers Club, which
Oh,
is Australia's largest gardening club.
yeah.
So we just got talking, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking for a bit of a change." So he said, "Come and work for me." So we were based at Heronswood down at Dramana on the Mornington Peninsula, and I started off there as the retail manager and learned the retail side of the business. I then managed their other garden, which was the Garden of St Earth at Blackwood. And then Clive said he wanted to build the business interstate. So I went over to South Australia and we joined the Royal Botanic Gardens over there, and we have a shop or an outlet over there that I set up, and we negotiated the first, I think, about 7 or 8 years of rental for them, which was nice and cheap, believe me. So that gave us a presence in South Australia. And then I went on to become the hardware manager. And that was another great it was a great journey for me again, because we were looking at all the different types of products that were natural, that were organic, that no one else had. And that were the things at that stage were things like rock dust. So we had Monash rock dust come into the hardware lines. We had Myco Gold, which is the fungal spores. And then we had other great products like biochar, and so I introduced all these products into the Diggers Club for the hardware thing, and they become one of their biggest sellers of all time. And then after doing hardware, I became national sales manager, and then they approached me to do a design for the Melbourne International Flowers and Garden Show up in the exhibition buildings. So we put together a package and went and saw the people who did all the promotion and put a PowerPoint package together with my design and all the things that we were going to bring to the show. So it wasn't just about showcasing us, but it was about showcasing the plants that we had, all the incredible edibles and the perennials and all these that we all grew. And then we had a huge marquee down the back where we did education. So we got experts in to do talks and all this sort of thing. And then the main feature of the actual site, which was 16 metres wide by 32 metres deep, it was the biggest site that they'd ever put together at the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show. The main feature was actually a mountain of pumpkins, all heirloom variety of pumpkins. So we had Turks, turbans, and all these different coloured, pumpkins. And it was the most Instagrammed site of anything. And we had about 436,000 visitors, through it. So it was amazing. And then, of course, that was so successful, they asked me to do it again the following year and the following year. And, of course, we won commercial awards for the best commercial gardens on that as well, which was just fantastic. It was, really a real good thing to do. So you get to meet some wonderful people, like a lot of the ABC gardening crowd, Costa and, all of them. They were just fantastic to meet. And then after that, I became the chief designer for gardens for the Diggers Club. So I would go out to clients, members of the Diggers Club, and design gardens for them using perennials and incredible edibles and raised beds and all that. So a nice little journey. But after 13 years, I'd come to the end of that as well. So that was when I decided that that was enough. I could chuck my my boots down and hang up my coat and my hat and do nothing. But I don't want to do that. I love doing gardening. I love doing garden design, and I love learning something new every day and sharing that with as many people as I can, on either on Instagram or through our Muddy Boots podcast.
Yeah, speaking of the podcast, how did that come about?
Oh, look, that was really, really, really interesting. Just further up the road from where we lived, we used to walk our dogs every morning, and there was a property up there, 10 houses up from us, and they had a beautiful little black dog. So our dogs got on, really well underneath the fence. And then I'm walking past, and then you get to meet the people in there. So we met Elizabeth, and Elizabeth is an absolute. She just loves gardening. So Elizabeth Garden Girl, she had her own little Instagram site and a YouTube channel, I think, as well. She was doing something one day, and I said, I wouldn't do it that way. I'd do it this way. So we just got talking, and I helped her out with a few things around the garden. And then she came down with her husband, Brett, and they recorded a couple of podcasts, not podcasts, Instagram and YouTube sites on my backyard, which has got 8 raised beds and 70 fruit trees and miles of hedging and lawn and all the rest of it. So they posted that, and it was my nephew that actually saw that, and he spoke to one of his mates who's a pretty high-end mixing guy. I mean, he did all the mixing for Phil Collins and for Paul McCartney when they were touring here in Australia. So he came and saw us and said, you two would be absolutely fantastic to set this sort of thing up as a permanent, basis. So Elizabeth Garden Girl and myself, we did it. And my son Blake does all the programming, and Elizabeth's husband Brett, he does, all the recording and all that sort of stuff. So that's how it all started. And then we got guests in, and we used a lot of the people that I've met through my journey in, as well as including, clients, which has just been fantastic. So, and we're getting a lot of positive things coming out of it as well, and we really enjoy doing it. Bit of a laugh.
Yeah. It's the key to good podcasts. What I think is entertaining and education.
Yeah.
So yeah, and yours has got that in spades as well. Pardon the pun.
Oh, thanks, Joel. Thank you.
But I love the Q&As as well, and that's what made me realise how deep your knowledge is about horticulture, because you've got people listening from all around Australia, and there'll be people calling up from Queensland with certain pests, and they're going to have different pests because of the weather to what we have in Victoria. But you knew what they're talking about, and so how did your knowledge, like not just local knowledge, but broadly grow so much?
Well, the way that would have come about was the Diggers Club would go to gardening expos, generally on the east coast of Australia. So we would go and do, we'd go to the Nambour one, we'd go to the Sydney ones, and all this sort of stuff. And I would go up there and do talks on the main stages and so forth. So you get to know the climate, you get to know the environments in those particular areas, and then you get to meet people at those expos that you share the knowledges that they have, and that's how it all goes around. This is where you all pick it up, So I got fabulous rapport with people in Queensland, northern Queensland, South Australia, New South Wales. The only ones I don't have is WA and the Northern Territory, unfortunately. So I can't help many people out with that, unless they can tell me a little bit about it. But having said that, we have the Diggers Club, as I said, it's probably got about 80,000 members all over Australia. And when you're a member of the Diggers Club, you get a little membership badge that has got what's called a heat zone and a cold zone on it. And that then refers to the trees and shrubs that the Diggers Club grow and all the rest of this stuff. So if the plant you're looking at fits the parameters within their heat zone and cold zone, that plant is guaranteed to grow where they are. So if people, in WA can say to me, listen, I'm a heat zone, my heat and cold zone 4 and 10, well, bang, it makes my job really, really easy. So it's just little things like that,
Yeah. And I've heard you also mention, and you mentioned before, but you mentioned on your podcast a bit, is I think it's Mica Gold you're talking about?
Myco Gold, yeah.
Myco Gold. So what is that, and what does it benefit the plants?
Okay. So Myco Gold is produced by a company called BioStim out of Queensland. And the chap that I deal with up there is Tim Lester. He is an absolute gun on agriculture. And he's put together this packet of Myco Gold, which has got 4 different types of fungi. And then out of that 4 different types, there might be a dozen of each substrates of those 4 major fungal spores. So in that one packet, there will be one specific fungus that will have a relationship with any plant that there is on the planet. So what happens is that when you're putting a plant in, and I specify this in every one of my designs, that there's got to be, the Myco Gold's got to go into the bottom of the hole, and it's got to go in at, however many grams into the base of the hole. And what happens is that once that plant has been put into that and the water's been applied, the fungal spore will then turn on, and it'll attach itself to the root system of the plant. And what happens then is it takes from the plant the 2 sugars, fructose and sucrose, from the plant, which is created through photosynthesis, and it will grow its root system in a symbiotic relationship for the plant. So it can get down through clay and deep mine through the soil to where moisture is, and where the major elements like phosphorus, for instance, is washed deep down and is inaccessible by the plant's roots. And it can then draw those up and feed them back to the plant. So it's a wonderful symbiotic relationship that's happening there. And it basically means that those plants can become drought tolerant and nutrient dependent upon the fungal spores. So it's just a way of making our whole environment so much better. And I guess that the way that this sort of came to me was when I used to go and do some talks and so forth. I'd say to people, "What's the largest living organism in the world?" And they think they come back with the whale or something like that. And I'd say, no, in actual fact, it's a fungus. And over in America, they measured one fungus to be 1 square mile, not kilometre, 1 square mile in size. And you've got to ask yourself, well, what the hell is it doing there? It's having a relationship with the environment that it's living with, and that's it.
Yeah, I've heard, I think it was on the Plants Grow Here podcast with Daniel Fuller. He was talking to a fella, and he was talking about how they think trees can communicate with each other through the fungus.
That's right.
Yeah, and I'd never realised how important it is, and also how much damage you can do by just digging out all the soil and then bringing in new soil. Whereas you're better off working with what's there. And I was wondering whether that Myco Gold that you were talking about has got some sort of relationship with that.
It is, and it's all that. As I said, it's something that goes in every one of my specifications and every one of my designs. It's just the way it is. It's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. People are going to spend huge dollars on having a garden constructed. The last thing you want to do is come back in 12 months and see the damn thing fall over. So you can build these things into it, like the compost and the lignite humate, for instance. That's one that's on my specifications now. Or the likes of biochar. All these things are improving the soil so that the plants can look after themselves once they're in there.
Yeah, and I reckon that a lot of landscapers, because I know that's all I do at the moment, which I'm going to change, is we'll put in water crystals and just your Osmocote or equivalent. And that's it. Just sort of, and some don't even do that, but
no.
A lot of people just do the basics like that. Whereas you could, it's not going to cost hardly anything more to do the stuff that you recommend, and it's going to make such a massive difference long term.
No, that's dead right. I mean, this new product that Vince from Clyde Compost has been working on, this lignite humate, which is just brown coal. It's the dirtiest coal that we have, that we're creating. We're using at the power stations. There's only 20% carbon in that, and the other 80% is humate. That humate is the building blocks of a rainforest. So he's currently looking at loading the lignite humate onto a container ship and taking it over to Dubai. Where over in Dubai now they're demanding that all the businesses use 30% of their own products that they're growing themselves. So who knows? This could be one of the biggest things out. And we got 600 years of lignite humate up at your lawn and mowing and all that. That's just sitting there, that could be going to improve our soils in just such an immense way. The lignite humate can hold up to 200% moisture in the soil. That's just, if you're not putting that in, you're just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things I'm wondering whether a lot of people in WA's ears are pricking up because they have such nutrient poor
Oh
soil
yeah,
because it's just sand.
yeah,
So there's a lot of additives that they do to their sand to make it soil. So I reckon there'd be a
yeah,
lot of stuff that they'd be keen on.
yeah. Well, I'm sure there would be, and the problem that we've got there is that we've got this here in Victoria, but getting it to WA is the problem. And this is where Vince is currently in talks with Bunnings to get his stock into their stores, and then that can go Australia wide, and then everyone's got access to it.
Mm.
And Vince is the only guy that I know that puts big dollars into having every one of his soil components and compost tested. And he has it tested by the woman I worked with at Turf Research all those years ago, Mary Cole, so she's a brilliant agronomist, yeah.
That's an ironic name as well.
It is, absolutely.
So how many years have you been back working for yourself now?
Probably about 5.5 years now. So I started this just before COVID, and luckily my first jobs in this was a 10-acre job down on the Mornington Peninsula, which tied me up for a long period of time. So I was otherwise occupied rather than being locked up. And because I was allowed to go out and have a look at jobs and all the rest of it, they released and stopped a few of the more stringent things.
Yeah.
So yeah, about 5.5 years, and I've just finished another 10-acre job, which is also down on the Mornington Peninsula. I'm currently working on one in Mount Eliza, and there's one in Tassie coming up, another one at Taradale, which is further down the bush as well. It's a 50-acre site. So yeah, and luckily all my clients have been brilliant. They're just lovely people to work with.
And will you go out to Tassie as well? You spend a bit of time in
Yeah,
there?
yeah. There's a job down there at Cresy, which is just south of Launceston. So, and it's in dairy cattle area down there. It's a new build, so we'll go down there probably the end of March or early April, and go on and have a look at some other gardens down there, and educate myself a bit more about the different environments that there were. We did the west coast of Tasmania last year, which was just an absolute eye opener for me. To go down to Strahan and have a look at those rainforests there, and just see what it is I'm talking about, and banging onto people about just how it works and how it sustains itself. It's just incredible. Yeah.
And you do your drawings by hand as well.
Yeah, these are my favourite tools here. The pens, the drawing pens. That's it.
And you made me feel bad about myself on your podcast because you said, because when I hear someone say that they hand draw their designs, my first thought is what happens when someone wants to change something. And you said, I think in all your years you've had one person change it, and that's because you're really listening to what the client is saying that they want.
Yeah, and taking the brief and making sure that you've got every single thing written down, and you've asked all the questions. And I mean, that one job was a chap who's way up there in terms of a CEO of a huge company, and he wasn't interested at all with the design until it came to the presentation. And what I'd drawn was a garden that had lots of lovely curves and so forth in it, and he just said, "I hate curves." So that was the only job I've ever, in all that time, I've had to go back and redraw.
Yeah.
Because, if I'm not asking the right questions, then I'm not doing my job. And, one thing I'll say to people is that I'm not here to put my design light on you as a client. I'm not telling you what you're going to have. You tell me what you want, and I'll embellish it and make it really something.
And is that something that came natural to hand drawing? Or...
Yeah, it did. And I mean, look, my drawings are all done on transparency, and I use a blue pen to start with, and get everything drawn up so that I'm happy with the way that the plants all work one with the other. I've got the layers all worked out. I've got the shapes of the garden beds all worked out, and when that's complete, then I'll ink it in. And if people want to change it, well, as I said, I've never had to do that except for once. I'm pretty happy about that.
And one of the things I love about hand drawings, I spoke with Tim Pilgrim about it as well, because they look so beautiful that they are, as like the landscaping is one thing, but the design is a piece of art once it's finished as well. So
yeah,
that'd be one of my favorite things about getting a hand drawn design done, would be getting to look at it and then seeing the garden outside as well.
Yeah, and that's a that's where it really comes in. And what I tend to do is if I'm working Monday to Friday on that design, I get it finished. On the weekend, if I don't want to get out in the garden or it's too hot or too cold or whatever else, I'll generally do a watercolor on that plant so that even brings out the color of the plants, how they work one with the other. So people get a really good look at just the way it is, and then it becomes a piece of art. I don't know how many ex-clients have got them framed and up on the walls.
Yeah, that's what I would
But,
do as well.
yeah, it's a lovely thing, and it's something I love to share. I was lucky enough to have had a fair amount of artistic flair earlier on. When I was at school, for instance, that I like to bring that into the fore of my design again. So it's a complete package, basically.
Yeah.
Well, I think it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then also, the fact that you've got the construction background as well after doing that, and also the turf, like the knowledge about that is invaluable. And it's something that doesn't get taught when people are studying.
No, it doesn't. And, that just sort of shows you the shortfalls within the education system. I don't know how many people have asked me, would I go and do talks and so forth on it? No, I'd rather be doing my work on the drawing board rather than in front of a lecture class. I still go out and do that. I did a talk at the Doncaster Gardening Club a little while ago, and they said it was one of the best talks that they'd come across, which was just it's a nice little thing to do, and you get to share what someone else has shared with me. I'm not about holding in the things that someone has shared with me. I want everyone to know, because I'm still learning too. And when I learn something, I'll share it with them. It's what life's all about.
Yeah, I was thinking the same when you were talking about when I asked about how you learn about the pests in Queensland, that sort of thing. And you were talking about how you spoke to people when you're in those states. There's so much different reading about it compared to talking to someone about it, and then you can bounce questions off each other, and then you can relate things. So yeah, talking to people is such a great way of learning.
Yeah, and that's it. It's building up that network of people. It's just fantastic to have that network of people that you can ring up and say, "Hey, listen, can you give me a clue on this or whatever else?" It's just terrific. Yeah, really, really good.
Now, I imagine after so long at the Diggers Club, are they still contacting you for certain things?
No, look, I said, I'd had enough at that stage, and things just got a little bit to the stage where you shake. I spent that many weeks away from my family, doing these expos and all the rest of it, that you never get that back. Weekends the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show, I was there every single day. I was on the main stage in the main hall every single day, sometimes twice a day. And it just tires you out. You get to the stage where you say to yourself, well, I've had enough of that, and I want to go and do something that's important to me now, and that's back doing design work.
Yep. Yeah, that's it. You got to, there's one thing to enjoy the actual job, but you also got to have a balance as well. So you got to enjoy your life.
Yeah, I thought that, they had a lot of staff changes and, a lot of different people coming in, and they wanted a new way of doing things. And that's good on them. Let them do that. But, it wasn't part of my journey, so that was it.
Yeah. And you've got a fair few videos on your Instagram page. They're also quite educational as well, and entertaining. So when did you start doing them?
Oh God, not long after I had finished up at the Diggers Club, I came and the kids said, you've got all this knowledge, Dad. Get off your bum and do it. So we're just self-taught on all that. We don't sit down and cut and crop or anything else like that. The cameraman gets out there. I just think about what I'm going to say, and it's a one take. If it doesn't work, well, bad luck, and that's it.
Yeah. When you say cameraman, you're referring to your wife?
I am. Yeah, look, I get so many people, say camera woman or Leslie or whatever else. Look, if it draws a bit of attention or a remark or something else, I don't mind, and nor does she.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, there you go.
Where do you see the future going in the business? Have you got a certain amount of time you think you can keep designing for?
I'm going to keep on going until I can't pick a pen up.
Yep.
Or I can't see. I've got glasses and they haven't altered in all the years, so that's not a problem. I don't have arthritis or anything else like that, so I'm just going to keep on doing jobs for old clients. I've got old clients that are up to their fourth or fifth new gardens in West. They've moved on to different places, so it's a wonderful rapport that you build up and you have with people, and they know what you not know what you can do, and that's it. Now, so all my designs come from word of mouth. People say, well, here, this is the guy that I want you to contact and get a design from. So I don't advertise, and the Instagram's not about advertising, except I like to show people that I'm not just all about bloody vegetables and fruit trees and pests and disease. That I do have another bit of creativity that goes on to my designs, my plans.
Yeah, and there's nothing better than a repeat client. That's the ultimate compliment you can have.
Yeah, it is. It's brilliant, and when they refer you, that's just a beautiful thing too. They've got that confidence.
Yeah. The last question for you, Keith, is who you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast?
A good guest for you?
Yes.
Gee whiz. I reckon a great one would be Matt King from FD Ryan. He is a fabulous guy. He's a long established person within the industry. The business he's a director of is Ryset. I don't know whether you ever come across them at all. They're one of the biggest agricultural suppliers of all. But he set up a niche business for his son, James, with all these beautiful hand-forged tools that you won't break. You will not break. They're just beautiful tools. He's doing lots and lots of research all the way through on old tools and how to make them better. He's just a whiz, and he's a lovely guy to talk to. So I'd give him a go.
Perfect. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Absolutely love your passion, as I mentioned, and yeah, there's so much people can learn from you. So thank you for not only coming on but also sharing your knowledge.
Thank you very much for having me, Joel. I'm really chuffed about you inviting me on. So thank you very much.